I see so many friends. So one of the first things we wanted to do was a little bit of try to do a virtual inclusion tool. We usually start our in-person facilitation this way. So we're trying to be creative, and that's part of the thing we're going to talk about today. So I have I'm going to put some instructions in the chat if I can figure this out. So we just want to know who is in the room. So if you primarily identify as parent, put a plus. If you're a teacher, hashtag !admin, star student support. If you're a TA coach consultant, put a question mark. Or if I missed one, which I'm sure I did, just type in kind of what your primary role is. And you can send it to everyone. Then we can just kind of get a good sense of who's with us today, which is really, really helpful. And you guys can see it too. School nurse. Good. Yeah. I knew I missed one. How could I miss school nurses? They're so... Robin would be mad at me. Okay. That's so great. And you could just keep doing that as we talk. It's really great. And if there's, you feel free to use this chat is going to be saved and archived and used. So one of the things that I'm going to work on with my co-hosts, who I'll introduce in just a second, is take the information from last week and this week, which are going to be kind of thematic together, and try to create like a blog post that hits the main points. And I'm using the chat area to help me remember. Like I take my own notes, but I'm also looking there for things that you guys suggest. So just keep that in mind and feel free to use the chat liberally. Okay, so I'm going to introduce my co-host, and then Emily's going to teach us another virtual community builder. All right, so today, again, I have with me Jim Sporleder. Hi, Jim. And James Moffett. James. And then Emily Daniels. And they're going to help me today as we guide this very awesome big group conversation. All right, Emily, go.
All right, so one of the things that Lara and I like to do when we train together is to help people feel encouraged to participate in some way. So it's a little more challenging in a virtual format, but we've come up with a couple different ways in which you can do that. So we call this practicing radical acceptance, and we're going to do it virtually through one of 3 hand movements. So and the purpose of this is, like, if you hear someone describing something or saying something that really resonates for you or makes you excited in some way, or you are like, oh my God, that's totally me, we would love for folks to use their hands, either like a thumbs up. So can I see a thumbs up right now from folks? Good. See that? See how that feels to even see other people putting their thumbs up? Another option is also jazz hands, like, oh my God, totally feel that. And then the last one is to use the hang loose. Okay, the little hang loose. Can we all see that?
I am in California.
So just sort of notice in your body how it feels to actually feel and see other people moving their bodies. And so for those folks who don't have their video on, again, we encourage you to join us if you can, because there is something that feels good about knowing that we're not alone. And I just like to bring the body into that if we can. So you'll be seeing me do one of those 3 things probably a lot today.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Another thing I wanted to share with you, and this is another way we're trying to be really creative doing these virtual conversations. So last week, a very good friend of mine who I've known since I was in high school, Stephanie Steiger-Welch, she's on this, joining us today as well. She's a visual practitioner, so she takes graphic facilitation notes, and she did that while we talked last week, and I didn't know this. It was really an amazing, awesome surprise. So I'm going to share with you, I'm going to try and share my screen with as many people, and this will help us go over, kind of give a touchstone of what we did. So she is going to do this again for us today while we talk, which is really cool. So last week, we really started this conversation around what would a better normal look like in education when we return, as we go through this. And we talked about how we help connect kids and help them with fear, how we keep connected to our kids, how will we maintain the improved parent-teacher relations that we're seeing, which is really, really great to hear, how we bring new learning back into the classroom and address the trauma that people, parents, teachers, kids are feeling, admin, everybody is feeling from this pandemic experience, and how do we take care of us? both now and in the future. And that regulation, like starting with those, you know, the hierarchy, regulation, relation, and reason, and regulation is more important than academics when we first get started with a group. So I wanted to share this with you. We're going to keep doing these. This was super helpful to me. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a second once I figure out how to do that. Okay, there we go. I do this all the time, you'd think. But yeah, so I felt like that was such a, and I'm a visual person and I love this practice. It really helped clarify. I had taken a bunch of notes, but when she sent that to me, I was like, yes, that's such a great way to capture what we talked about, and it'll help as we try to turn last week and this week into some kind of summary blog post as well. So thank you, Steph. All right, so one of the things that we brainstormed in between last week and this week is that this is a really big topic. You know, both the themes that I addressed in my blog last week about the future, you know, the possible bright spots in the future, and other ones that have come out from other people. There's so many areas that we could talk about and tackle. And I was like, okay, I don't want it to be too overwhelming. I want people to find this super useful. I want them to keep coming back. So how do we kind of chunk this into digestible, bite-sized pieces that keeps it useful and captivating? So the thought was that we would do this, do theme-based conversations with the general overarching theme of, you know, education upended. What is our potential future for change, and how do we want to return to our buildings when we finally get to? But that within that, there were so many unique themes that could each easily take a whole hour that we really wanted to focus in. So I hope that sounds okay with everyone. Thumbs up, jazz hands. Like, does that resonate for everyone? Yeah, okay, good, good. See, that helps me as your facilitator too. I know that what we're thinking is resonating for you.
Do you want to share with them some of the themes that?
Yes, so that's where I'm perfect segue. So some of the themes that we pulled out, so Emily helped me do this earlier, and we had talked with James and Jim about this last week before we started. Some of the themes that we kept seeing recurring, not just in my blog, but in other people's conversations, is some of what we touched on last time, like regulation, connection, right, being super important, and how do we keep that in the forefront? Relevance in education, relevance in our teaching. What does it mean to be relevant? It's not just project-based learning, but how do we keep what we're doing super relevant? Because that seems to resonate. Equity. How do we maintain equity when we're talking about the digital divide, about, you know, some combination of virtual? So anyway, so much to talk about around equity. It's a huge issue here in Los Angeles. School mental health. How do we prioritize school mental health when we get back? What does that look like? Is it like, how do we do that through telehealth? What has that been looking like for people? My own child gets therapy from the school psychologist through telehealth, you know, and it's been interesting as a parent to watch that happening. It's been okay. Grading. Districts and schools are ditching grading and going to pass fail, or all A's, or no grades, or credit no credit, you know, all sorts of combinations of rethinking about how we do grading. Resource sharing. How are we collectively, so I've seen so much amazing, like almost overwhelming sharing of resources. People are like, there's too much, I don't know what to do. So how do we do effective resource sharing with each other so that we're not reinventing the wheel, and it doesn't feel overwhelming? Testing. We have no standardized tests this year. What does that mean? I know, right? I'm happy about that. So what does that mean for us? How does that help push our thinking for the future? So this was just a brainstorm list of things that we had started to pull out. I'm totally open to suggestions. So if you have other suggestions of topics, please put them in the chat, and we will add it to our growing list. But I think if we approach these discussions that way, you know, through these themes, we're still going to get, we're going to be able to get a lot more of a rich conversation going. So those are the themes we've been thinking about starting with. They sound good? Great. All right. next. I'm just looking at my note. I made a lot of notes for myself for today. Okay, so we wanted to kind of continue, we really focused a lot last week on regulation and relationships and connection. And we thought that that would be a really great topic. It's really in the forefront of people's minds, both currently and in the fall. How are we doing that well right now? What do we need more of? How are we doing that for ourselves? How are we doing that for our kids as parents? How do we feel like we're connecting to schools? And really thinking about regulation. What does that look like virtually in this virtual world? Is it possible? What are the challenges? What do we need to learn? All sorts of questions. So thinking about regulation in that order, right? Regulation first, and then relation and connection. And we want to crowdsource your amazing ideas and figure out how to share that with everybody again, like in some sort of ongoing summary blog as we keep doing this work and trying to condense it for you all. Okay, that's enough of me talking for a moment. Emily was going to go over real quickly the hierarchy of the brain, and then we can dive into discussion. Is that right? Does that sound right, Emily?
I was just going to share with folks a visual around this whole notion of so what Lara keeps saying, the sequence of engagement is Dr. Bruce Perry's heuristic. And so it's that's how the brain processes information, which is why we want to encourage that as much as possible right now in both what we assign students to be doing. So if there's ways in which to be creative in our assignments for kids, in addition to our time spent with them virtually, to really be actually engaging with them in some form of virtual, patterned, repetitive, rhythmic exercises, then that would be a way in which to help us be more resilient come the fall. We really need lots and lots and lots of opportunities to do that in a way that we wouldn't normally really think much of. And so for me, I'll just speak personally that my children right now, although they are, hanging in there with the remote learning, they are definitely struggling with the long, what seem like endless hours sitting on their computers. There's very little that they're doing right now with their teachers and or with their assignments that actually gets them up and moving in any way. So all I was going to do, I'm not going to teach anything. I don't want to bore anybody, and everybody here, I'm certain, has seen brain, illustrations or models 1,000 times. I was just going to share one little tiny nugget, if I could, that I think is helpful. And I know for some of you that are there, you've trained with me, and so you're like, oh God, she's pulling up that again. But just bear with me 1 second. Oops, that was not the one I was going to share. I was going to share this one here. Here it is. So for the folks that don't know me, my name is Emily Daniels, and I have Hear This Now. I founded Hear This Now, and I've also developed a polyvagal somatosensory Tier 1 approach to trauma-informed teaching called the regulated classroom. So that has been, I'm sorry, I don't know why this is doing that. Can you guys see this screen here? Can you see that, Lara? Did I share that?
Yep.
Okay. And I can't get this to move enough so that I was going to try to make it bigger so folks can see it. But the regulated classroom is basically built upon the principles of Perry's work and also Dr. Porges's work. And so I stole this illustration from actually Dr. Tina Champagne, who's an occupational therapist, brilliant woman. And what I like about it is I want you to just notice that bottom tier of the brain, it's supposed to be, obviously it's not a brain, it's a pyramid, but it's supposed to be reflective of how the brain grows and develops, and also how it processes information throughout the lifespan. So if you notice, you're seeing that like a big part of what's happening for the brain in that kind of, I guess it's supposed to be yellow, but it looks a little bit more like clear or white.
Hey, Emily?
Yeah.
You click on present up at the top.
Oh, that's what
it might make it big.
Okay. Is that better? It's common.
There we go. Whoop.
Sorry, there it is. Okay, now you guys can see it. Can I see any thumbs up on that? So anyways, I think this is a particularly helpful way in which to think about somatosensory processing for all of us. So what I mean by that are, what are all the senses that our bodies have in order for us to process information and experience? And so looking at the bottom foundational tier, you're looking at tactile, vestibular, and proprioception. Those kinds of inputs for the body tend to be very regulating. So this is where you want to nerd out on your occupational therapy terms, and you want to understand what is meant by tactile input. There's deep pressure, there's light touch. These things have different effects on the body. Deep pressure is supposed to stimulate the parasympathetic response, so it's supposed to stimulate that calming, that rest and digest. Or light touch, like if you want to try this on your head right now, you know, this is butterfly tapping. This is oh, Laura's doing it. Jim, come on, Jim and James. Come on, big good leaders. That's a form of light touch that's supposed to activate the sympathetic and be alerting. So that's tactile. Vestibular is like, even what I'm doing right now, I have a chair that's like swings from left to right. So if any of you right now are sitting in one of those spinny chairs, those are phenomenal. Last week, Lara was regulating herself unconsciously, constantly spinning back and forth in her chair. That's a very vestibular kind of movement. Is there some way to replicate that in our lessons that we're delivering to students, in our conversations with parents, to ask them, to invite them to sway with you? And then the last one is proprioceptive input, and that's input to the joints and to the muscles. So, you know, even taking your arms and doing a nice big stretch like this, up and over, or getting up against a wall, any kind of push or pull that extends the joints and the muscles in the body can have very regulating impact. So and if folks want this slide to just help them think about like a framework, or just to remind them of, when you think about regulation, what does that mean? I think this is a helpful, you know, hierarchy to consider. So that's just our little, I told Laura, I think we should have like a nerd moment in each one of these presentations, and different folks can present for the nerd moment, but that's my nerd moment to share with you. And I hope it's helpful in getting you to think about the kinds of somatosensory exercises that are likely to regulate you and to regulate your kids that you're serving, or the families you work with. The last thing I will say too, and I mentioned this last week, but it's a really important point, and Perry's emphasizing this a lot in his office hours, is the need for therapeutic dosing. So we need to be doing these kinds of things for ourselves and for our kids as much as we can. So that doesn't mean walking once a day for 30 minutes. That means more like within an hour's time, considering, am I getting up? Am I moving? How am I moving? Am I doing it in a patterned, repetitive, rhythmic way? Like, am I getting up and doing 10 jumping jacks, or getting our kids to do that? So you want like probably intervals of 3 to 5 times an hour for 3 to 8 minutes, like those kinds of somatics. We need to be moving a lot for all of this, people. And the more we can do that in a shared way, the more benefit it will have on our capacity for physiological resilience. So, okay, I'm not going to say anything anymore. That's the end of my nerd moment. I hope that was helpful for people. And I'll stop sharing the screen. Okay, so just bear with me while I figure that out.
We got this.
Right, go ahead.
We got this.
I don't know if folks have questions or want to add to that, or want to clarify anything. Okay, I'm almost done. I almost figured this out. Stop share. There it is. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Okay, good. Now I can see the chat too. Awesome, thank you. And that was really our big question for today for all of you, that we want to think about, is how are we, or how do we incorporate these lessons from Perry, like patterned, repetitive, rhythmic, regulating activities in a virtual world? How can we help parents? How can we help teachers? What have you seen that's been working really well? And then also thinking forward, you know, how can we do that when school returns? And so I want to ask Jim and James, and pause for a minute. Do you guys have, do you have thoughts bubbling around that you want to share with the group?
I have lots of thoughts, and it's kind of I mean, in the last week, I've been on a lot of calls with just districts around the country and then trying to have conversation with them about how do we prepare for students to come back when we don't know when they're coming back, and how do we, you know, we have those conversations about the need to connect and regulate at the beginning of any school year. And, you know, we have to have some pretty strong routines and structures in place when we have kids that are gone for 2 months over the summer, but now we've extended that to 3, 4, 5, I don't know how many months. And how do we adequately prepare kids to come back, feel welcome, feel, you know, that sense of family that we work so hard for all the time, when we have students who are in settings where there is or isn't a routine right now. And so a couple of the nuggets that I've gotten out of conversations with other districts, I was talking to some folks in Schenectady, New York yesterday, and one of the teachers on the call said one of the things she really appreciated was a quick survey that her daughter's teacher sent out, and it was really just asking about the day. And it wasn't asking any invasive questions. It was just asking, like, do you have a routine at home right now? It's just a yes or no question. Do you have a routine? Because I think about as kids coming back into a classroom or into a school, that might be a helpful piece of information to know, like, have they had someone, whether, no matter what that routine is, have they had some sense of routine in this time away from school? Because that's one of the things we do pride ourselves on in school buildings, is having some sense of routine. So I thought that was interesting, and I thought that was very innovative and creative of that teacher to just pose that simple question. And I think that'll give her a lot of feedback. And one of the other conversations we had yesterday, also from Schenectady, was, you know, how do we begin next school year? And I thought it was interesting. One of the ideas that just came up in the chat was, what if whenever we come back to school, even if it's next school year, we promoted all these kids to the next grade level, what if we spent the first 2 or 3 days of that next school year with kids going back to their classroom last year? You know, like, just to feel that sense of some normalcy, like, have, you know, if you have 2 or 3 days in your classroom from last year, reconnecting with those kids, reconnecting with those students, and then we send you on after that third day or whatever, however many days you decide, to your new teacher for that school year, if that's a way that we can ease kids into the school year. And I think we talked last week about what are we seeing now that we want to see continued when we get back to the brick and mortar. I think that's one thing I want to see, is just that outside the box thinking, because that's not a common thinking that we would have, you know, if this was a normal school year per se. But because we're faced with this pandemic and we have to be looking for ways to use this as an opportunity for growth, I love that I see that outside the box type of thinking that really allows kids to feel that sense of connection and regulation that's important. So those are kind of two big points that I thought about right now. But
I
Dad
love
Jim,
that.
he probably
Yeah.
Well, James, I think you're spot on, and those are some questions that we really need to be asking. I'm still stuck with what do we do now? Because we're deep into this isolation piece. We know our struggling families. We know we have kids in environments that are hurtful, and so that fear factor comes up. And so I'm always thinking in my head is, what do we do now to make some kind of connection with our kids? And I was on a webinar yesterday with a group of alternative high school principals, and one shared that they were sending their intervention specialists out to each house, and they were meeting in the driveway. They weren't going in the house. They were social distancing, but to have a conversation of just, hey, I'm out here to check on you, to make sure that you're okay, and to let you know that we're thinking about you, we love you. And that's one of the most, be honest with you, that's one of the most powerful examples that I've heard. And I also want to acknowledge, I know there's got to be some real sense of overwhelm for teachers and limitations as far as how they deliver the content, you know, packets. Some have the Chromebooks. I think we all would probably agree that our struggling kids don't handle the Chromebooks real well. You know, being on, like you were sharing, Lara, being on that, or Emily, your kids being on that computer for so long, and you got your kids are well grounded and what have you. And if they're struggling, then you know that our kids that struggle academically, you can only imagine the frustration that they might be feeling. And I know I brought it up, I think, last week about my own granddaughter. She's got a really good teacher, but she's pounding these packets out, you know, and she made a beautiful card for her teacher telling her how she missed her, but she's had no feedback on anything. I saw her the other day and I said, have you heard from your teacher yet? And she says, no. So we've got all these packets going out, but where's if there's no feedback, to me, I just keep thinking connection. How do we drive that? How do we become creative so that those kids know we haven't gone away? For some of those kids, we've gone away. How do we create situations where they know that we're still here, we love them, and that at some level let them know that we understand how tough it is right now.
Great. I'm seeing that's awesome. And it's so like lots of resonating in the chat with everything that people are saying. And I'm glad. So let's keep the conversation going. What, anybody want to share out loud, you know, welcome to Allison, if you see any that come up that you want to bring in, what do you think, what have you seen working in a virtual space to keep people regulated? Because I have 2 teenagers at home, and what, you know, Jim and Emily said is absolutely true. And I saw in the chat, you know, I have like keeping them regulated. They're always like, Mom, stop talking about regulating my body. And I'm like, no, because you're either playing video games or doing Zoom classes or doing Google Classroom, or, you know, if it's not school, then with their free time, they want to play video games. And anyway, it's just, that has been a huge parenting challenge, is getting them to see the real importance, even though I know it's important. So yeah, I would love to hear.
Looks like you have, Denise Elijah has raised her hand. She's looking to chime in. I don't know who can do that.
Yeah, Allison's got the moderation. Okay. All right, so Allison, are you able to unmute?
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yep. Hey, Denise.
I think you unmuted the wrong Denise.
Oh, you're like, not me.
I have lots to say, but I'd like to hear what other folks are saying. We're having lots of chat conversations, so.
Great. That's great.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, there she is.
I can move if I have to. I actually have my kids listening to Chinese in the background.
We got you. It's all right.
I really have appreciated one thing my older son's teacher's done, which is that they've done lunch together every Friday. And all they do is they literally just eat lunch together and talk and play games, muting each other, just be goofy together. And I just really appreciated that space, them having that space. They already were pretty connected as a class, and that was probably one of the biggest strengths. I wasn't super happy with them academically, with that teacher, but I really appreciated the opportunities for connection and leadership that she provided that I felt like other teachers had kind of missed out on. And so I really appreciated them continuing to have that kind of space. And the other thing kind of on Mr. Jim, what we had said just a minute ago about connecting, I just really want to appreciate that and acknowledge, because I feel like I've worked with alternative school for years and also a program supporting alternative schools, and just that intentional, like, just see their face or talk to them on the phone or talk to them, connecting with the family, connecting with the kids, at least every 2 weeks, if there was enough, you know, if we could spread out all the staff to just get to every family once every 2 weeks. Just how are you? What have you been into? You know, not even necessarily, but just like the same person building a relationship. Like that would be huge with keeping kids connected in the long run. And you honestly, like, you would build so much foundation for a stronger school year the following year. Much talk about a new normal, like parents that feel comfortable in the school building and feel like there are people that are their allies in the school building.
That's great. I love that. So yeah, thank you for the visual reminder, right? Yes, I love that. Adriana, you have your hand raised. Okay, Allison, you've got the mute control.
Oh.
You're on.
Okay, we're back. I'm in New Zealand, so basically
Hi.
Hi. So I also do a little bit of, while I'm not working, surveying. And so one of the questions is, how do you communicate with people outside your bubble? Because in New Zealand we have bubbles. So everybody lives in bubbles and you stay within your bubbles. So basically what people tend to do is they say, oh, you know, we don't contact people, connect with people much. But then when you go through the list, they do actually contact each other quite a bit. So basically, I think people don't realise that they do have moments of connection because they're focusing so much. You know, when you're under stress and that, you get tunnel vision, and you think, oh my goodness, like parents, oh, it's a computer. They have to know how to use the computer. We don't have worksheets. We don't have any work to do. We don't know these, you know, if it's not the computer, if it's not a Zoom meeting, if it's not hard copies, then people start thinking, oh, they're not learning. But guess what? Children learn all the time. School is only accelerating learning. It's not learning as such. But going back to connection, so there's the phone, the computer, the email, and you know, people say, no, I haven't communicated. And then when you haven't connected, and then when you go through the list, they say, oh yes, I've done that. I've seen friends on the street. So in New Zealand, what they do is they have streets where they bring out their mats, and or you know, the neighbours go up and they do their yoga. You know, bring the yoga mats, and they're all on the street. But you know, we're getting to winter. There's meeting people, keeping within 2 meters. You know, meeting people as walking. So it's about acknowledging those basic things and saying, hey, your children are learning, and it's those things that are really important. Talking, listening, you know, body parts, singing, dancing, and we as parents need to model that to our children and just talk aloud and say what we're doing. But we
I
also
love that.
need to say that to our parents, so parents realise and don't get themselves all strung up. And teachers need to realise, hey, you know, don't get strung up because you're not doing a really valuable. And plus we learn from each other. So kids see others and they hear what others are doing and they realise they're not alone. And that's the importance. We are not alone. People are out there. Talk to your neighbour. So people go out on the street and have, you know, their beer sessions sitting on their seat at the end of the
I love this. I love this because I think, and I've been thinking about that a lot too, that when we have, you know, as parents, we see ourselves as teachers for the first 5 years. And we see our kids learning because of what we're teaching them, and our, you know, their grandparents are teaching them and their community is teaching them. And then somehow when they get off to school, we forget that they learn from other people, not just, learning doesn't just happen in school. So even I've been seeing a lot of comments like that lately, and that goes to kind of the relevance. And I've been trying to remember that myself as a parent, like now is a great time to teach my teenage boys how to cook. We can do math that way, but like, you know, there are things that they can learn, and they're learning, active learning while they're at home and connecting. That isn't, and I think that especially as a former alternative high school teacher, it's easier for me to think outside that box because I used to have to constantly to get my kids focused. But anyway, I really resonate with that. Does anyone else have their hand raised? I can't see everybody at once. Or anybody else that wants to raise their hand.
Yeah, we have been just having people put their comment in the chat, and then we just call on people to share their comment rather than doing a raised hand.
Okay.
And so I think Gail had a good comment a little while back. Gail, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just did.
Thanks.
Hey, everybody. This is so exciting. I'm watching all these. Hi, Emily. I'm reading the comments and private messaging some people, and this is awesome. One of the things after Emily, you did that great, quick little, like, kind of thing for us to do. We were saying maybe what we could do, the big we, is do just a one pager that is really practical things to do based on Emily, on your what you just talked about, that could be useful. Yeah, useful for kids of different ages, and it could be shared with parents, and for older kids, shared with kids. I have a 19-year-old that just got her a college freshman year aborted, and kids, high school, older kids, I think that they would, if we gave this information to them and said, hey, this is important, they would probably take it and do much better than what we could do for them, is just give it to them and empower them. But for the younger kids, like, have it for certain ages, because there are certain things that would work at certain ages. And then the other thing I was kind of thinking that I didn't write about is, wouldn't it be cool if communities, there's lots of yoga teachers, for example, or movement teachers, we won't call it yoga, movement teachers that are at home right now because they can't do anything. They're doing stuff online already. And wouldn't that be cool to connect that community with the teachers? And then that gives the teacher a little break, because they could do a virtual Zoom movement class. And a friend of mine said, I talked to her this morning, and she had just done that for her 8-year-old son. So anyway, those were a couple of ideas.
I love that. And that's something we can do.
Do you want to hear from more folks, Lara?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's hear from Amanda Meyer.
Hey, Amanda.
You can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Okay. Does it work?
Yeah.
Good job.
Oh, it works today. I made a few comments, so I don't know which one.
You were talking about nature walks and scavenger hunts virtually. Maybe you want to share what that looks like. I don't know.
It's, I'm always geared towards that elementary level. And so I think about when we were talking about structuring a day, you always want to have and make sure you let parents know it's so important to structure that movement into the day, and often into the day. And so one of those was going on scavenger hunts in nature, even recording yourself on one and having kids find certain things. And then when you guys report back, they can show what they found. If you're giving a certain, we're looking for a rock or a pine cone, or all sorts of different things that they can go and search for. I think that would be amazing to see. I have not seen it yet. It just came to my mind. But I always, even when my kids, they're teenagers now, we still go on walks in nature all the time. And we're always looking for things, and we're always observing things. And I think that's such a regulating piece to your life anyway. And to be able to convey that, there's a bunch of teachers that take their classes out and they go outside and they learn their lesson and then they come back in. How do we push that as far as doing that through our computer or through our, do we record one and then have a student record and share what they found? I mean, there's so many things that can happen from just that thought.
I love that. And Denise just chimed in that the National Park Rangers are doing once a week virtual walks that families can join into. So that's a great resource.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. And then
Yes.
James, I want you to voice your comment out loud if you'd be willing, because that's really important.
Yeah, I just think, like for me, like for any of us, when we're not an expert in the field, we look to the experts to guide us in what we should be doing. So like, if I don't know anything about singing or whatever, I'm looking for somebody who can teach me in that area. So like, we have to realize that these parents aren't teachers in the sense that we are in a classroom. Yes, they're teachers of their child, but it's different. And so if we're wanting these cool experiences for the kids at home, whether it be scavenger hunts or lunches or yoga or all this movement that we want to see, we should be including that in the way that we plan for the week. So I know teachers around here, they send out a lesson plan. So when they send out their lesson plan, rather than send out 50 worksheets, because if you send out 50 worksheets, what is the parent going to think they're supposed to do? They're going to think that they need to complete all 50 worksheets. So as we're planning, like, we should be including what we're talking about right here in the lesson plan. So I think we can't be counterproductive in what we're expecting. We have to, if this is what we expect, this is what we should be sending out. And I think it would be just looking at all these, I mean, incredible ideas, like ideas that I hadn't even thought about. I think if I was in a classroom right now and sending out lesson plans, I would be every week have some small box about connection and regulation, because I think that's important. Parents need to hear and know about that. But again, I've seen some lesson plans where they have like on the side, like, here's some other activities you can do, and they list some of those cool things. Like, I wouldn't put that on the side. I would make that part of my, this is it. These are the things I would encourage you to do, because that is learning as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some of the chats I've been watching as we're talking about these ideas have brought up the great point of like, how do we, yes, we're talking about how to do this virtually, but how do we do this when kids don't have access and there's equity? So you can see how all these topics that we're going to talk about tie together, right? So in Los Angeles, this is certainly an issue. Not everyone has equal access to technology, to the internet, to, and schools are trying to send packets home to address equity. What's one thing that we know that all of our kids can get? Well, they can get the packets from, in the mail or dropped off or whatever. So how do we think even more creatively that if we have to address equity by sending home paper, how can we incorporate these understandings, these ideas that way as well, so that make them as useful? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, like, because this is the push and pull that is going on. So yeah, I'd love to hear ideas.
So I don't know if she's willing to do it, but I see a comment here from Christine Cowart. I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name. And I just want to pull this thread if we can, because first of all, I feel you as a mom of two that are, in 7th and 9th grade. I can't keep up. And so I would love to hear that a little bit too, because then that's also maybe a perspective we're not voicing yet about what is it like on the part of the parent when you do have all this coming in, that maybe you have a school that's really on it and doing great work, but you're still overwhelmed. So Christine, would you be willing to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So I have 2 kids. Both of them have extensive IEPs. My husband is a stay-at-home dad who usually helps with all the schoolwork and that kind of stuff. And I'm currently working from home. It is completely overwhelming. So when the schools first shut down, we had 2 weeks of sheer chaos where I got emails from everybody who worked at the school, including service people that we never, ever, ever met before. And we almost felt like everyone felt they needed to send an email so that we knew they were there and they were relevant. They needed to keep their job and get paid. We then progressed past that. There was a period of transition, and now we are in the remote learning period, where both of my students have a minimum of 3 hours where they need to be online engaged in classes. Unfortunately, the 3 hours are the same 3 hours a day. So that not only ties up our internet, while I'm on internet meetings myself, it means that we can't be there to support them. So we're getting comments like, my younger one is having trouble focusing and is running around while he's supposed to be on the computer and getting the dog and showing the house and all these things that are just, it doesn't lend itself to any kind of structure that they were hoping for in these online classes.
Yes.
And the kids are getting completely derailed by the chat boxes and all sorts of things because they never had a foundation. And I did say at least he's learning to use it now. So when he is an adult and needs to use it for work, he'll get that. But it's just not been conducive to learning.
Yeah.
And to learning new material.
Yeah.
Which is what they're to do.
Yeah.
And on top of that, then we're getting our email boxes filled with email. So this isn't just a rant. What I'm trying to get at here is that I would love the packets. You know, and I don't think there's any one size fits all.
Right.
But I literally went out and bought workbooks, and I'm working on them with my kids because they're not getting anything out of the internet. And I'm sure some kids are, but we are not in a situation, and I'm in Vermont, so here we also have a lot of internet unreliability.
Yeah.
And like I said, my husband and I are both at home, so we can kind of be a support from the back end, but there's a lot of families that can't. It's just all over the place. And to think that we're going to learn new material during this time frame, I think what we need to do is support our kids, help, like you were saying with the regulation, get them through healthy, because otherwise when we come back to the school year next year, we're going to be dealing with all the built up trauma that they've faced just from being in their homes and not able to interact, not able to have social regulation or any kind of social interaction that was meaningful. And we're going to be dealing with the fallout from that, and they won't be learning next year either.
So much, yes. I love this. Yes, and I so relate. Both my kids have IEPs, so I'm right there with you. Those are amazing threads there, and I actually wrote special education down as one of our themes too, because wow, so much to say and think about, and I just love all of these things that are coming up. Any other threads that have really popped off for anyone, or any comments, co-presenters?
I think what she just said, that comment, just kind of adding on to that, I think we talk about differentiation a lot, but this has kind of pushed us to hopefully really see the need for true differentiation. Like that's something that should be happening in classrooms. It should be happening during this time too. I think it's unfortunate that anybody is expecting new learning to happen during this time. This is not the time for that. As I look and I think about what Kansas has done, and I'm speaking to that because that's where I'm at. And I think it was Stacey Wolf wrote in here earlier, like, I appreciate that the continuous learning plan, like it's based on your age, and it's based on how much time you should be spending doing academic work each day. And like for kindergarten through like, I want to say first or second grade, it's like 45 minutes a day of academic content. That's all it's prescribed. That's all that it's supposed to be. And by the time you get to like fifth grade, I think it's like up to 90 minutes or something like that. And I think that's a fair expectation for a parent who's working a job or has other, that's just, and I think the other thing, I read this from Jimmy Casas, he put a kind of something out there about this continuous learning. He said like, continuous learning is different than regular schooling per se. And we shouldn't have these expectations of it starts at this time and it ends at this time. Like, I think we have to be really cognizant of what's going on in our families' households and allowing them to allow this to fit into their day. Like, I think it's unfair of us to expect that they change everything in their day to meet our needs. Like, that's never been what school is supposed to be about. So why would we expect it to be about that now? So I think that's,
love it.
We have to take a step back, and like, we have to humble ourselves and realize, like, as teachers and as educators in the schools, we are not the end all be all. Like, we're truly having to work in conjunction with parents even more so now.
I love that so much. And I just wrote down that as another theme, like scheduling, flexible learning. Like, how can we think about this in a bigger way? How can we think outside our box? Absolutely. I love that so much. I think that resonates for a lot of you. I saw lots of jazz hands. Awesome. Sadly, we're getting close to the end of our time again. I don't know how this keeps happening. We're having such a great time chatting. I would love to hear it. So from James and Jim, and then Emily's going to close with something for us as that brings us together. I'll just share my last thoughts and then I'll hand it over to you guys. I think I'm just so glad that you're here and that we're having these conversations, and I really look forward to them continuing every week, and we'll dive into different themes each time. Feel free, like if you think about something later, feel free to send me an email. I'm going to put it in there again in 1 second. About like a topic you want us to do or an idea that you want us to share as we try to put this in a blog form, that kind of stuff. Yeah, just thank you so much. Jim, any last thoughts?
Well, I appreciate so much the input from our parents and their perspective, because we're looking at parents who are putting structure in their day, who are trying to put that piece in for their kids, and look what kind of stress it's put on them. And then, as James says, you know, as we have to prepare for our kids when they come back, look at the families that are not able to put that kind of structure in. Where's that pressure? What are those outcomes going to be? What are the measurements for them? And just a lot of unknowns that can create anxiety with those of us that would be able to put that structure in for our kids. And then I just feel like we've got to keep in mind those who are not able to create that structure within their home. What kind of outcomes are they looking at? What are their fears? What are they dealing with?
Yeah.
Really appreciated that feedback.
Yeah, me too. James, any last thoughts?
No, I'm excited for next week.
Me too. Oh, great. I've got this huge list. We're going to do this every week for like a year. This is great. I know. Woo! I love it. All right, Emily, do you want to?
Yeah, so Lara and I talked a little bit about just sort of the structure of this, and we thought it might be helpful to have some kind of closing. And so I have here a modified or adapted version of Indra's Web, which is actually I believe it's a Buddhist piece, but it's sort of like a meditation. And you don't have to participate, but you can listen or not. But I'm going to invite you to just kind of try to center and quiet yourself, because I think that's something that is hard for many of us during this time. So I'm going to read this slowly, and you can just take it in if that works for you. Close your eyes and imagine that you're suspended in a glittering spider web that stretches out indefinitely in all directions. At each node or crossing point of the net hangs a single glittering jewel. Imagine yourself there so you can move in closely to one of the jewels. Look carefully, and you'll see that the polished surface of the gem reflects all the other jewels in the net, infinite in number, like two mirrors facing one another. Each jewel reflected in one gem also reflects all the other jewels. Reflections are infinite. Open your eyes and know that you are like one of those sparkling jewels, as is every person around you. Every jewel is connected to every other jewel. Each has an independent place within the net, and we all reflect and influence one another. A change in one jewel or person produces a change, however slight, in every other. Whatever you do to one jewel affects the entire net as well as yourself.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. That's a great way to end this conversation for today. Allison, are there any logistics that we need to go over?
I don't think so. We are posting these to YouTube. So if you all are wanting to catch one that you missed, or if you came in late, you can go to YouTube and look up ACES Connection, and we have a playlist for all of these videos. So you can also find them on our website by clicking on media and videos. And so the next discussion is tomorrow, and that's going to be with Elaine Miller-Karas, and she does the community resiliency model. She's amazing. And then Carrie will be hosting that one. And then we have Ingrid doing health equity next Tuesday. And then on Thursday, we're back with these same lovely folks doing the same topic again. So we typically will post these on Mondays on our website on the right-hand side. So for all of you that are wanting to keep posted, we just use one registration link per week. So if you register for one, you can join any of the offerings next week. Or if you register today, you could use the same link to join tomorrow. And so thank you.
Yes.
Maybe we can all wave goodbye.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. This has been lovely. I'm so excited. All right. Thank you. See you next week.